Being in a relationship with a narcissist changes your entire life and in fact your entire self. But if you intentionally heal and you go through and grow through the process of healing and get yourself to that point where you're thriving, you might be ready to start dating again. And in that case, you might want to know exactly what to expect for yourself and for your partner.
How do you know when you're ready to date again after narcissistic abuse? And what are the warning signs that you're not ready?
What are the best ways to avoid narcissists in relationships?
If you think you're ready to date now or you're planning to date in the near future, this is really important for you. The first thing you need to understand is that you've got to come up with some standards. You have to raise your standards right up so that you don't fall into another narcissistic mess like you did last time. Don't think I'm judging you. I did the same thing.
The fact is that on the outside, someone who is a love bomber and someone who is healthy, who has actually fallen in love, they might appear to be pretty similar. But there are some subtle differences that are often overlooked when we are sort of under the spell of new love. Some of those differences might surprise you. You probably already know that statistically speaking, nearly everyone is willing to overlook certain little flaws in the beginning of a relationship, and nearly everyone is probably a little more careful with how they treat their partners and what they say to them early in the relationship. And even in these so-called normal relationships, as time goes on, nearly everyone finds something that used to be super cute or at least tolerable about their partners that becomes at least a little bit irritating. Nearly everyone argues and nearly everyone admits that they've been mean to their partner when they didn't need to at one time or another.
A toxic narcissist is someone who has an extreme lack of empathy, and that shows that in the way they treat other people.
So how do we know what is the difference between healthy relationship interest and love bombing from a narcissist? What differentiates a normal healthy relationship from a toxic one?
They feel like it's okay to be mean to people. They justify that behavior. So while the narcissist probably has some idea or notion that being mean to people or rude to people is unacceptable in our society, they somehow figure out a way to justify it to themselves and the people around them. They feel like since they've been wronged on some level, they have the right and even maybe the responsibility to be mean to whoever it is that wronged them. On top of that, they tend to get really offended really easily, and they leave a lot of people wondering what the heck they did or said wrong. Or people saying things like, but I didn't mean that, or I didn't mean it that way.
The Insta Love factor. A narcissist will almost always proclaim love or soulmate status very early in the relationship. This will almost always lead to an insta commitment on their part. Insta Love is your first clue that you might be getting involved with a narcissist. A healthy person will take their time getting to know you before rushing into things. To be fair, there are a few real life cases of love at first sight that are totally legit. But if we're being honest with ourselves, those are really few and far between. It's not realistic. And if this person is really your one, they aren't going to mind taking things slowly.
Narcissists love to be the leader of something. They like telling people what to do. They think it's almost like their job in the world to do that. Leadership positions work for these people because it helps them to feel in control and to be dominant over other people. And of course, it helps them get their much needed narcissistic supply, or that constant supply of admiration, adoration, positive reinforcement in general.
The time factor. The narcissist might say, oh my gosh, I just want to spend every second of every day with you. You know, as they roll over and stroke your face as you wake up together for the third time 76 hours into your first date or whatever. But a more healthy person might say something like, gosh, I can't stop thinking about you. I hope you're having a good day, when they're texting you on their lunch break after you had an amazing third date. You see the difference? When you meet a narcissist, you can find yourself completely and absolutely bowled over and just wowed by their level of awesome. So much so that you feel like all you feel like doing is being near them. And the truth is that the very same thing can happen with a healthy new love interest too. The difference is that while a healthy relationship can and often does have an infatuation phase, it also still allows you to stay involved with other important parts of your life. Your family, your work, your spirituality, etc. It does not require you or beg you to dump people in your life in order to avoid missing anything in the relationship. A healthy relationship encourages you to stay involved with your real life. A narcissist demands every moment. A narcissist is going to want you to become dependent on them because this allows them to become dependent on you, my friend, as a source of narcissistic supply. A healthy person might want to spend every moment with you. They might really want that, but they're going to understand and even support your need to continue with your regular life while you get to know each other. Even if it means they tag along with you for your family events and outings and things like that, or with your friends sometimes. It does not require you to stop living your own life. That is a big red flag of narcissistic behavior.
They're super hot. They're super attractive, or at least they like to think they are. Not every narcissist is attractive, but most narcissists on some level have the belief that they are in some way better than or more attractive than most people, whether that's physically or otherwise. And even those who aren't attractive seem to have this almost overblown sense of self-confidence that is almost shocking to the people around them. One study done at Washington University found that narcissists did tend to be rated by most people as more attractive or more stylish than others. But that is not always the case. Another study done in 2008 found that while most narcissists rated themselves very highly on the IQ scale, most tested at only average. And in that same study, when people were asked to rate these narcissists based on their looks, the overall ratings in general were lower than the ratings they had given themselves.
The drama factor. When you're dealing with a narcissist, there are so many red flags early in the relationship, one of which is often the drama factor. Narcissists often shock you early in the relationship with some strangely little placed outburst or fit, and one that'll be quickly righted, and for which sometimes they'll even apologize. Maybe, for example, they'll blow up at a waiter a little too aggressively when the food shows up cold. Or maybe they'll be super mean to a friend or a relative on the phone, and you'll be shocked by this. And if you question them or you mention their behavior, they will explain it away by explaining why they're justified in their treatment of that person. You know, like, oh, well, that person owed me money for 15 years. They deserve whatever they get. Or she's always headed out for me. In any case, it's never the narcissist's fault. While a normal person might have a drama moment here and there, they're more understandable and they're not quite so world-stopping as those experienced under the reign of a narcissist. A narcissist will create drama where it doesn't need to be and will break down over the tiniest issues. They might break down if something major happens. You know, they lose their job or their friend dies or their dog dies or something else that any average person, including yourself, might also feel like breaking down about. But a normal person won't freak out if they ask you for some money to buy a soda and you don't have any change. You see what I mean? A narcissist would.
They like to put everybody down. Narcissists are known to need to kind of stand on the heads of other people in order to make themselves feel good enough. It helps them to think more positively of themselves if they can mentally put other people down. It's almost like a drug for them. It's a way they get narcissistic supply. They're always seeking this approval or this validation from people around them, and yet, of course, refusing to do the same thing for those same people. This is part of the reason for why they cheat so much, because they're always looking for validation from people who don't know all their tricks yet.
The empathy factor. If you're in an early relationship with a narcissist, there are little subtle things that happen in your conversations that can kind of tip you off if you watch for them. Simple patterns that will be evident if you know what to notice. One of the biggest is how empathetic the narcissist is capable of being. Watch what happens when someone in your life or the narcissist's life experiences pain or tragedy in their lives. Watch how the narcissist behaves. You can tell when someone is genuinely concerned versus when someone's being sort of polite about things, right? A narcissist can be a really good actor, and they might even be really good at follow-up questions when they're in the love bombing phase. But when things are back to normal, a narcissist will change the subject if the topic varies from anything that interests them, often rudely or by creating a big scene to get the attention back on themselves. If you're the one dealing with the trouble, a healthy person who's really into you will show genuine concern when someone you care about is hurt or goes through a hard time. They will never make the pain or the tragedy all about them. Instead, they're going to stand by you in whatever way is appropriate at that phase in your relationship, whether that means stepping back to allow you time to deal with the issue or to grieve with your family, or it means to literally stand by you physically while you go through it. If your love interest is the one dealing with the trouble, they will be concerned as much as you might be in a similar situation, and they will want you to stand by them in whatever way is appropriate at that level in your relationship. While a narcissist will want you to feel sorry for them while you baby and spoil them to help end the pain, whether it's their personal pain or not. It'll be all about the narcissist, not the person actually experiencing the issue.
Narcissists think everybody else around them is stupid. Now, when you're early in a relationship, this might be a little difficult to see because you're in the love bombing phase. But look really, really closely and watch the way they treat people around them. They might be a know-it-all, or they might just kind of have a hard time getting along with other people in general. And if you listen closely, you'll notice that they tend to not get along with people because they refuse to be wrong about anything. And at first, you might see this as normal and healthy because you're only seeing it from their side of the story. But if after you hear a few stories, you recognize a pattern and you notice that they seem to have this people who think differently than me are wrong kind of mentality, well, then you'll know that you might be dealing with a narcissist.
Here's a comment from Michelle who says, my ex overshared about deeply wounding trauma, and I thought it was out of love, and shared my dark stuff. Now I'm not sure if his story was even true. And now he has ammo against me. Not again. Yes. I have learned that the hard way as well. And it's important that we set the pace and realizing that there's, it's part of having functional, like healthy boundaries of not having our life be an open book. You know, people that are like, oh yeah, my life's a total open book. That's a sign of some damaged boundaries there. So the things that are near and dearest to you, that are the most vulnerable parts of you, a person has to kind of earn their way into your inner circle before sharing that kind of information. And it's easy to kind of get caught up in oversharing, especially if somebody else is very forthcoming with all of their deepest, darkest stuff. It's kind of a psychological thing where we tend to like subconsciously match the tone of the conversation. So if somebody because it feels weird otherwise, right? Like if I'm opening up, I don't know, about a horrific car accident I saw, the other person's probably going to continue along that level of intensity and not switch over to what they had for lunch today. Yep. But the downside is when you have a manipulative or abusive person, they're opening up, telling you all this stuff that may or may not even be true. You don't realize it. You're opening up, sharing all of your stuff with them. And the next thing you know, it's being used against you somehow.
Nobody ever appreciates them, or at least that's the story they tell you. This is especially true for grandiose narcissists, but you can also see it with covert types. They always feel like everybody owes them something, or everybody should be more thankful to them for something, like the world owes them something. This is where this big sense of entitlement comes in. They think they don't get the recognition they deserve, and they feel offended when other people do. They're a bad loser. And what I mean by that is they have a way of needing to win everything. And when they don't, watch out. In fact, if you've been in a relationship with a narcissist very long, you might have gotten to the point where you intentionally lose any game or competition with them just so that you don't have to deal with the after effects of them losing. Worst part of it all is they're also usually a bad winner. They don't do well when they lose, and they might do a little worse when they win by bloating in your face or shoving it down your throat a little too much. The narcissist goes really fast with everything. Your relationship started fast. They might have said they love you too quickly, or if it's not a romantic relationship, maybe it's a friendship, they jumped in with both feet, and by the end of week 2, they were calling you their BFF. In any case, the narcissist never moves slowly in relationships. Before you know it, you're stuck smack dab in the middle of one. The worst part is that as fast as it goes and as quickly as you feel a false sense of closeness to this person, you really don't get to know the person at all. It's all an illusion. The truth is that it takes time to get to know a person. It takes time for a person to begin to feel comfortable with you. And in a real healthy relationship, both parties would want to take the time to get to know each other before jumping to that extreme level of commitment. The idea of being swept off your feet might be fun to think about, but in real life, it doesn't really work. They are one heck of a storyteller. Narcissists tell stories in a very interesting way. Well, of course, they're almost always the hero or the star of the story, right? We probably guessed that one. We all know that part of the story, and the fact of the matter is most of us probably don't tell a lot of stories where we're the butt of the story, right? So, okay, we get that. But here's the part that you need to really watch for. This is the kind of secret of the storytelling. When the story does not have a happy ending, the narcissist does not take responsibility for that ending. They absolutely always blame someone else for the unhappy ending unless there's some other game at play here. But one thing that almost every narcissist will do early in your relationship is tell you stories of their past relationships, whether we're talking about friendships or romantic relationships. And here's where you can use this little bit of advice. Listen to the stories they tell you about the former supplies or former friends or other people in their lives. Listen to the way the stories go. And what you'll notice is that in almost every story, the narcissist winds up being either the hero who saved the day or the victim who did nothing wrong and was totally innocent in the whole thing. You will probably feel really sorry for the narcissist when you hear the story. You will probably feel some kind of way about the ex or the friend that they're talking about, some kind of defensive energy you get for them. You'll feel like they've been victimized and your heart will hurt a little bit for them. And that, of course, leads you to want to put your arms around them and tell them everything's okay, they're great, they're awesome, they're amazing, and boom, we have a pity party. We have narcissistic supply in full, and that is in many ways a test they will use against you. They have very few friends, or they have a lot of friends they don't know very well. This is not always the case. There are many narcissists who have what seems to be a group of really close friends, But when you look deeper, you see that there's a lot of turmoil in that group. And a lot of the people in the group will have some sense of obligation to the narcissist. But you will see that the narcissist very often does not actually have any close friends. They might have a large group of acquaintances and fan clubs and things like that, but very few people who actually know them for who they are. And usually if you find that they have a best friend or they're really close to their mom or their dad or brother, those people are inevitably enabling the narcissist. They are flying monkeys whether they know it or not. I mentioned earlier the sense of entitlement. Well, this is worth mentioning again. Narcissists have an outrageously unearned sense of entitlement. I remember feeling shocked more than once with various narcissists in my life, just simply based on the fact that they really believed that they were entitled to certain privileges or certain things that other people were somehow not entitled to. They needed special treatment. Narcissists do consider themselves more special than other people. They do expect better treatment than other people. They really believe that whatever it is that they want, they should get, and that you should automatically give it to them. And if you don't, you're useless, you're worthless. And here's a little bonus for you. Narcissists will never give you anything without expecting something in return. So even if they really do solve a problem for you, let's say you're behind on the rent and they pay your rent for you, well, then they'll have some sort of payback that's due them. Whether they actually ask you to pay them back or they charge you a ridiculous amount of interest or they just expect you to do whatever they want. This is often seen with the altruistic type of narcissist, and it kind of leads them to want to naturally exploit other people without guilt or remorse. They have no empathy, they have no remorse, so it makes sense that they would do this. They see people as objects or extensions of themselves that are just there to kind of serve them, not really as people. And when you don't serve them right, they will most definitely devalue you and discard you, whether they do so permanently or just for the moment with a silent treatment.
Sue said, as a people pleaser, it can be hard to recognize these red flags. And I agree. And that's why for me personally, because sometimes I know myself well enough to know that I fall for stuff and I feel sorry for people and I let their feelings affect me and all that stuff. So I'll set rules for myself. Like when I left my ex-husband, I said, I'm not going to even date anybody until I'm divorced legally. That took almost a year. So I waited till, the actual year mark. And then I said to myself, well, I'm going to have timelines on, when I become intimate with someone, when it's acceptable to me that we take the relationship to the next level, when, we could move in or when, not that I expected every single person to want that from me, but I knew that at some point this would become a thing. And I also knew myself well enough to know that if I was caught up in it, I might make wrong choices. And so I'm not saying I always made the right choices, but I'm saying that having those rules in place, even today for certain situations, gives me a certain amount of strength, right? Like if I tell myself this is my rule for myself, then I'll follow through. But I find if you are a people pleaser or someone who struggles with codependency or whatever you want to call it, try giving yourself rules that you must follow. And tell yourself whether it's a timeline rule or it's a number of date rule. If you see a red flag, make a rule about that. Like if I see, 3 red flags, 3 strikes, you're out, whatever. Just give yourself rules and stick to those boundaries.
What can help too is kind of that post game day analysis. So taking time for reflection of, okay, how did this go? Like, did I kind of default into some of that people pleasing behavior? And if so, in what ways did I do this? And what was that about? I think for many of us that have kind of this default into that people-pleasing behavior, it's been a pattern. It's been how we've handled conflict and confrontation or just interactions with other people for a very, very long time. And I think kind of the message we picked up early on was that this is how we have a relationship. These messages of, relationships take work, meaning we need to get better at complying or keeping the peace. Don't rock the boat. Kind of stuff. So there's a lot of other messages that are underlying that kind of people-pleasing behavior, but realizing that a healthy relationship is an authentic relationship. And an authentic relationship is when two people are able to be themselves and real, obviously within the context of appropriate behavior, but they're able to have their own wants and needs and thoughts and feelings and opinions and all of these things and express them and feel seen and be validated. People pleasing doesn't fit into that. So these old messages that we had about, okay, in order for a relationship to work, we need to have people pleasing behavior, shifting that to, in order for a relationship to work, it's going to require authenticity, like that ability to be open and sincere and to have our boundaries match that. So people pleasing doesn't contribute to a healthy relationship at all. It just kind of keeps things in a holding pattern. So changing how you're viewing it too.
So here are 3 easy steps that you can take to avoid becoming involved with a narcissist in the future. It's so simple and you won't even believe it, but I promise you it works. Number 1, you have to take your time in the relationship. Make a rule for yourself that you won't go too fast or commit too soon in any relationship. For example, after I left my ex-husband, I made a rule for myself that I would not allow anyone to propose to me until we'd been monogamously dating for at least 1 year. And then I decided that I'd make it a long engagement just to be safe. To avoid getting involved with a narcissist in the future, just take your time getting to know a new romantic interest. Go slowly. Set your own rules based on your own perception of how long it took you to recognize that you were dealing with a narcissist in the first place this time. This can apply to literally any personal relationship and even to professional ones on certain levels. That is, you sort of maintain your guard in each type of relationship for an appropriate length of time before you assume you can trust anyone. And that brings me to number 2, you've got to stay connected to the other people in your life. In order to keep your life in balance and to protect yourself from getting enmeshed with another narcissist, you really need to be careful to still actively cultivate relationships with a variety of people in your life, even and especially when you're in the beginning phases of the new relationships and friendships. Remember how bad it felt when you were isolated from everyone by the narcissist? Well, this is the time that you need to be especially vigilant of staying connected. And listen, I don't care how in love you are, and I don't care how much you think it's your idea to stay in bed for 17 days straight and ignore your phones at the beginning of a relationship. Don't do it. Promise yourself that you're going to have regular contact with the other important, healthy people in your life, even if you need to schedule that time. So schedule your contact with your friends, with your family, to avoid getting sucked in by another narcissist. Narcissists won't tolerate it when you are connected to other people. So get yourself connected to a good support network and stick with them. And consider having maybe a recovery buddy who will check in with you on a regular basis and help you remember to remain connected to your network of support and love. This will help you to ensure that you don't inadvertently fall into your old patterns. It can happen before you realize it. That brings me to number 3, listen to your gut. Remember when you got involved with your narcissist and you felt a little off, but you couldn't quite put your finger on it? Or maybe you never felt quite comfortable in the relationship and you kind of always felt like you might lose it at any moment. Maybe you lived in fear of being alone or of falling flat without the narcissist. Well, this is another really important part of protecting yourself from getting involved with a person like this. You've got to listen to your gut. You've got to listen to your heart, those feelings that creep up inside you when you don't want to listen to them. It doesn't matter how exciting and how amazing someone is when you first meet them. You have to listen to your heart. You have to listen to your gut if you're going to stay safe. If something doesn't feel right, there is a reason for it. And if you're not sure, just go back to number 1, take your time. There's really no reason to rush. If it's truly a healthy and mutually satisfying good relationship and the person you've been waiting for all of your life, time should be of no concern. Take your time getting to know each other and enjoy the process. It can be deliciously satisfying if you let it. If you take your time and you have found your one, time is never an issue. Just remember that you deserve better, and remember that, as they say, there are plenty of fish in the sea. Taking your time in a relationship shouldn't be a concern for you, but someone who wants to push you to go faster than you're ready should. It's just one of many signs of love bombing over actual love.
Assuming that you have found a safe partner at this point, there are certain issues you're going to face in that relationship. For example, number 1, you're going to feel defensive sometimes when you shouldn't. What do I mean by this? Well, if you think about it, when you were dealing with a narcissist, the narcissist probably attacked you for every little thing. So anytime you made a simple request, like at a restaurant asking for no onions on your burger, your narcissist may have attacked you for that later. So any type of request that you make in the new relationship, you might subconsciously find yourself feeling a little defensive. Obviously, this can cause trouble with your new relationship, especially if that person isn't toxic, because they won't understand why you're defensive about something as simple as no onions on your burger. Now, once you're in that relationship, it might be helpful to explain to your new partner why you have those reactions, because in a healthy person, they might actually be able to help you work through them. However, I do suggest waiting until you're fully healed from abuse before you get into anything serious as far as relationships go. The next thing you might notice as a big problem in a new relationship is that you don't trust yourself, and as a result, you might also not trust your partner. Now, this could be related to having been cheated on by the narcissist and or having been gaslighted by the narcissist on a consistent basis. You just might not know which end is up, and as a result, you become hypervigilant and you question yourself and you question your partner. And of course, this can be difficult for the partner as well as yourself during the relationship. So how do you deal with it? Well, the first thing you can do is take a deep breath and think before you speak. It goes goes so far beyond that. And again, I'm going to refer back to what I said last time. You've got to heal first. Think about it like this. Your ex was constantly gaslighting you. You were being emotionally abused and otherwise, in some cases. Your entire world has been spun. You didn't get any validation. So what you must do is work on finding your intuition and learning how to trust it again. And personally, I think that's something that you should be doing before you get into a relationship. However, something really important to note here is that doing it before your relationship is great, but it's a lot easier to trust yourself when you don't have other people around you. So my point is that you may feel like you totally trust yourself and your intuition, but then find that when you get into a new relationship, you don't. So it's really important to be aware of that and do your very best to stay focused on trusting your intuition, not becoming hypervigilant and paranoid, but just giving that person the chance that they deserve, assuming they're a healthy partner. Eventually, you're going to have to work through it all and stop questioning yourself and your partner. Another thing I've heard people say is that in a new relationship, they might find themselves feeling more paranoid, more worried, more anxious when they haven't connected with their partner in a few days, especially when we're talking about a newer relationship early in. Speaking of hypervigilance, this brings me to my next point. When you're in a new relationship after an abusive one, you might find yourself having some irrational reactions to things. And you might be hypersensitive about certain things. For example, if you were name called in the last relationship, even a playful name might offend you. Or you might jump down someone's throat just because they somehow triggered you by doing something that reminded you of the ex. For example, one of my clients once told me that her ex screamed at her because she put his shoes on to take the trash out one day and asked what she thought she was doing. So later in another relationship, she was going to run outside for a quick minute and her boyfriend said, "Hey, just slip on my slippers, no big deal." And she went ballistic because he offered his slippers, where in the last case when she put on her boyfriend's shoes, she was attacked for something so small. So the reason that happened is because when you constantly live your life on the edge of destruction, on the edge of feeling like you're about to lose your mind, that constant tension that you experience, well, it takes a big toll on you and your body and your mind. See, the thing is that when you're in that situation, your default mode is, I'm expecting you to attack me. Any romantic partner, you expect them to attack you. And that's why you kind of end up reacting irrationally to really normal behavior. In a relationship with a narcissist, you lived in fear many times. That leads you to become increasingly sensitized to any potential danger around you. And so, of course, you're hypervigilant, you're anxious, you're nervous all the time. That type of reactionary behavior where you're kind of hypersensitive to everything, kind of, listening really closely to the tone of their voice, watching their face closely, that stuff is all related back to narcissistic abuse. It's second nature for you now. So it's difficult to drop it. It's important, though, that you work on trying. Again, if you're in a relationship with someone who isn't willing to work with you on this, you might need to step back until you clear this stuff up for yourself. Another issue for survivors of abuse in new relationships, insecurities. This is one that I can definitely relate to. In my first marriage, I was completely destroyed when it came to my self-esteem. I had none when I was done. I did everything I could to be good enough for this person, who it turns out wasn't good enough for me. But in the process of that, I found myself completely lost. I had no self-esteem. I had no ability to even consider myself remotely good enough for anyone or anything. So 4 years later, when I met my current husband, I found myself being very insecure in the relationship. I felt jealous. I felt hypersensitive, hypervigilant. It's exhausting. Thankfully, I'm past it, and it's such a beautiful thing to be past it and understand my value. But I want the same thing for you as well. And I got lucky in this case that my husband tolerated that until I got over it. He even tried to help me work through it. This might be because in some cases our exes said to us, you know what, you're not good enough for anyone. You should probably just not date anybody in the future, or not go out with people, or not be in relationships. Or maybe your ex said to you, you know what, you're incredibly damaged. I cannot do this anymore. Or you're just too broken to be in a relationship. They might comment throughout the entire relationship on all the things that are wrong with you. And what you might not know is that tearing down your self-worth, beating you up emotionally, making you feel like you're worthless, well, that's one of the ways they got you to stay around as long as you did. And so when you recognize that is a manipulation tactic, that is not who you are, that is not anything to do with you. Certainly they picked on insecurities that you had, that maybe you felt a little overweight, so they talked about how fat you were, or maybe you felt like you didn't have a good enough job, or you weren't good at something, and then they would always find that thing and pick on it, right? Well, their picking is exaggerated. They don't mean the things they're saying, but they say them because they want you to doubt yourself and be too scared to leave. In fact, some narcissists even say,
you know what? Nobody will ever love you because you're worthless.
Or no one but me would take you anyway. Something like that, because what it does is it makes you scared to leave. And combined with all the other crap that they're putting you through, this is pretty effective. But that's one of the hard parts about recovery, is that even when you're out of that relationship, their voice is still in the back of your head, driving you crazy, making you feel nuts. So we have to learn to silence those voices. One little quick exercise I will tell you about. Pattern interrupt is a great way to actually end those voices. And one thing I find kind of fun to do, a lot of my clients have enjoyed it, is imagine that person sitting in a chair in the back of your head. And imagine a little tiny version of yourself crawls up your neck, walks into your head, and pushes that person in that chair right out of your brain, out your nose. And then what I like to tell my clients is go blow your nose and throw that thing in the trash. Because that is kind of a way that you can visualize literally pushing that person out of your head. And of course, the other thing that works really well for me in this situation is to have an affirmation that I repeat to myself anytime I have a negative thought that most likely is a remnant of the voice of the narcissist in my life. My particular affirmation is, I now cancel that thought and replace it with this affirmation of my true divine desire. And then at that point, first of all, I've had to think of the sentence. Then I make a point of thinking of something that I'm grateful for, whether it's related to whatever I was thinking about or not. So if I was thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm too ugly to do this, I can either tell myself I'm pretty, or I can tell myself I'm really grateful that I have a beautiful home to live in and my children are healthy. Whatever. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be anything to do with a problem. It just has to be something more positive than what you were thinking before. So you have to understand that even when you are healed, when you're with a new partner, you might experience a lot of these things. You might find yourself, like I said, doubting yourself, having flashbacks or panic attacks, even developing compulsive behaviors like eating or gambling or drinking or whatever. This would be an effort to try to, of course, regulate your emotions. You might feel depressed, angry. Your communication might be more complicated with a new partner because despite the fact that they might reassure you over and over again, you might feel like you can't really accept the love because you don't really believe it. You might live with lingering doubts about their faithfulness, especially if you were cheated on. You might often assume that your partner's against you when they're not. You might find it really hard to address any conflict in the relationship and have a really hard time talking about it with your partner. You might find yourself withdrawing or just being distant from them because it's easier for you than to be close to them. Because with a narcissist, what did you have to do? You had to go gray rock. Well, in a healthy relationship, gray rock isn't good. And of course, you might have really serious reactions to things, like I said, that most people wouldn't. A couple things you can do as a couple if you're already in that relationship. You can look into trauma-informed therapy or even couples coaching, depending on the level of c-ptsd or narcissistic abuse syndrome that you think you're dealing with. One more thing I want to share with you on this is that when you are in a new relationship, and even before you get to one, self-care is so important. It's necessary. And one of the things that I think that has been a huge toxicity killer for me is that I learned how to love myself unconditionally. Well, that starts with accepting yourself unconditionally. So my suggestion to you is to focus on taking care of your physical self, your emotional self, and to work on unconditional self-acceptance. And then learn about what you're dealing with, what you're doing right now while you're watching this video. Make sure you understand what you've gone through. Make sure you understand the healing process and that you have gotten to the point in the healing process where you really are ready for a new relationship before you jump into one. Always take things slowly and never put yourself under pressure in these situations. The right person will wait for you if you ask them to go slowly. Take your time, love yourself, trust yourself.
All right, now this brings me to the question of the day. And the question of the day is, how do you feel about dating? Have you already started dating, or are you still kind of thinking about it, or are you nowhere near ready?
What are your thoughts about all of this? Do you think it's possible to be happy in a future relationship?
Share your thoughts, share your ideas, share your experiences in the comment section below, and let's talk about it. As always, thank you so much for being a part of my day and a part of my life. And hey, thanks for letting me be a part of yours. It really does mean a lot to me. Now, before I go, make sure you take a look at the videos I'm going to leave for you here and there. And while you're here, hit the subscribe button right there so we can stay connected and continue on this healing journey together. I'll see you soon.